In 1999, Roma communities were forced to fled the Roma Mahala where they lived, and were housed in displacement camps in Mitrovica in northern Kosovo. The camps were close to toxic slag heaps, and the land and the air in the area was known to be incredibly dangerous for human health, even at the time when the displacement camps were set up. They were initially set up as an emergency measure that was meant to last for 45 to 90 days, but the communities ended up staying there for over 10 years, and the last camp only closed 13 years later. And during that time, there was regular blood testing done to understand what was happening to this community. And the levels of lead in their blood was so high that it wasn't even able to be captured on the devices that were used to measuring them. It's one of the worst cases of lead poisoning that the world has ever seen. Numerous deaths were attributed to this, and especially children have been particularly affected and have had lifelong effects as a result of the lead poisoning. Our report looks specifically at the efforts that the victims have taken to try to seek justice and remedies from the UN over the course of many years. And what we found was that the UN essentially manipulated its own legal processes, that they continued to delay. It took 5 years for the victims to initially even get a decision that the claims were not receivable in the words of the UN. Then when they tried to file claims with what's called the Human Rights Advisory Panel, that's the UN's own body that they established to fill accountability gaps in Kosovo in particular, the UN changed the rules on them halfway, forced the case to be dismissed. When it was picked up again, there continued to be further delays. And one of the most shocking findings of our report is that in 2016, this UN established body issued a decision in favor of the victims, found that the UN has human rights responsibilities to provide reparation. And in the 6 years since then, the UN has entirely failed to implement any of the recommendations that were issued by that body. We were just in Mitrovica meeting with victims, and I think that they were quite clear that they continue to look to the UN for justice for their children. This community continues to live in extremely dire circumstances. And especially the kids, many of whom are more grown up now, continue to live with disabilities, developmental disabilities, as well as physical. And especially in the context of COVID-19, many of the impacts of lead poisoning make people extra vulnerable to COVID. So this situation continues to be extremely dire for the communities themselves. We also hope that this report will spur another review by the UN, and for them to reconsider how they've responded to their own panel's decision. It's quite unconscionable that the foremost protector of human rights in the world set up this body to determine its own responsibility and then went on to ignore its own findings. And so we're hopeful that this report returns the spotlight to this issue that has been going on for a long time, and that there will be action by the Kosovo government and by the UN itself to finally deliver justice to the communities.